Hey guys, Will back here from Music Protest. Today we're going to talk about I think this is the third time we've talked about devices from the Inspired by Nature pack that came with Ableton 11. And I love this pack. I've already kind of talked a lot about what I love about it. The one I'm going to look at today is Emit. And, you know, if you are working at all with like atmospheric sounds, you're looking to create ambience, moods, drones, things like that, then this is going to be really helpful to you. So we're going to look at kind of what's the vibe of this Emit Max for Live device, and what can you do with it when you're composing and also performing. So let's take a look at the description that Ableton gives for this. So we've kind of been over just the general idea of Inspired by Nature. It's using physics, basically physics-based principles like particles and fractals, gravity, mass, things like that, to sort of simulate situations that then create musical pitches or arrangements. So there's a series of vectors, devices, which we'll look at another time, and the one we're going to look at today is Emit. So this is great for experimental sounds, and they say, let me zoom in here, Emit's a visual granular synthesizer. So yeah, it's basically a loop player. It's a sampler, but of a granular type. So it's essentially a granular synthesizer, and it's going to have this zone in the display where particles will be emitted, and as those particles are emitted, they're going to basically sample and play back grains from whatever sample you load in there. So let's go and figure out how we can load this up. So I just got a MIDI track there, and I'm going to go to Add Device, scroll down to Packs, go down to Inspired by Nature here. Here it is. And this is going to be under Instruments, right? Because it can actually just create sounds automatically as long as you load a sample into it. So I'm going to go ahead and load up Emit and then switch back to software so we can see what the device looks like. So down here, you'll see the first thing says drop a sample in here. You could drop really anything. I'm going to go into my user library. I've got some samples. I've even got some nature samples, but let's see. I'm going to go into here, and I don't even know what that is, but let's see what it looks like. So I'm dropping that in there. All right, so what's going to happen here is it's loaded this sample that I put into kind of like a spectral display. So this is showing us frequency along the vertical axis and time along the horizontal axis. So from low frequencies at the bottom to high frequencies, and then over time. And we can see this little blue dot is an emitter that's already being generated automatically. So let's go ahead and see what this sounds like. All right, I'm not getting any audio. Let me check if my audio devices should be set up. All right, let me troubleshoot that, figure out why. Oh, you know what that is? It's because I changed some of my routing back here. All right. So, you know, it starts out being kind of chaotic, but I want to show you how you can create sort of more interesting ambient sounds with it. So basically, once you drop the sample, you can decide whether you want it to automatically generate emitter particles or whether you want it to be triggered by MIDI, right? So if we were to turn on MIDI here, then we could go back to push, and only when we play a note does it trigger a particle. Let me zoom in. So you can see when I hit a note, a particle is getting triggered. So that's one choice you have, is figuring out whether you want it to do this automatically or not. Then you can also create multiple emitters. So there's emitter 1 and there's emitter 2, so you can create a couple different if you want. Although you can have one emitter emit multiple particles. So we'll see how that works in a sec. So then you've got some modulation abilities, and we'll see how we could use that also to kind of create some interesting sounds. The thing I find kind of interesting in this tool, in this instrument, is this angle and bipolar and width values back here. So down here, angle, bipolar, and width. So you can see in the emitter over here, which I can actually grow in size if I want. Watch what happens to the emitter if I change the angle, right? So I can decide, do I want to go more towards bass, or do I want to go more towards treble, right? Because this spectral representation of my audio sample goes from low frequencies to high frequencies. So I can decide, for example, I'm going to just turn off MIDI for a minute. You can hear how the lower ones. Then I can decide, okay, do I want to have sound come out both sides? And what kind of adherence, what kind of range do I want those particles to occur in? These items here are kind of oriented around rhythm and timing. And then X and Y have to do with where is the emitter. And this is actually kind of a cool thing to do with the modulation. So if we wanted to, let's say, sync this LFO to a beat, and then go into my routing here, and I want to position my emitter based on that LFO. So I'm going to go with, I think, let's see, emitter, so emitter 1 X. Let's see what that looks like. That's right. So now the X value, the location on the X-axis of my emitter is being modulated by this LFO. So I can change this to half notes, right? 2 beats. Then I can come back here and I can decide that I want to have multiple grains. Now there is, I think, so this friction is slowing down the grain. So getting like a really deep force is kind of controlling how fast it moves. So that's a little hectic, but at a slow force and slow friction, I'm really getting some like drone-like sounds. And based on my modulation here, I'm getting some interesting variety. Yeah, so the way that the emitter, I think, can be used in comparison, say, to how I would like to use the one we did the other day, which was bouncy notes. Bouncy notes could be really useful for substituting a sequencer with something a little more chaotic and interesting and unpredictable, or substituting an arpeggiator, something like that. But Emit is going to be better for, I think, creating like unpredictable textures, right? Because depending on the samples that you load, you're going to get some pretty unpredictable things, like not really tonic. These are not scale oriented, because the pitches that are coming out of this are dependent upon the sample that you've put in. It's not like the bouncy notes where you can just decide, that you want to keep everything constrained to a specific scale. So I really think Emit is great for textures. And if you're composing with textures, like in video game music would be a really good application for this. Let's see if Emitter has any examples, right? I want to see inspired by nature, presets. So Emit presets. Let's see what some of these presets sound like and look like. So this is an example where you've got a lot of different particles, a lot of different particles going and exploring through the grains. So I guess this burst value can help you increase the number of particles. That's a pretty cool preset. Let's listen to some other ones. Pretty cool. So these presets could be like a pretty cool way to figure out what's possible. I mean, this would be I can totally hear this kind of as a background sound effect / pad in like a trailer or something like that. Some kind of music that you're trying to create like a really dark and kind of threatening environment temporarily. Very interesting. So here we actually have the start, I think, of the sample is being modulated. So what if I change that to 0? So yeah, you can. That's actually modulating the start of the sample. So it's taking like a small chunk of this overall audio, and then I can modulate and then the little particles are bouncing around within that changing sample to get this kind of metallic sound. Very cool. I like that a lot. Let's listen to some other ones. So with an example like this, it makes sense to look at rate and lifetime values here. So this rate and lifetime value here are going to have an impact on how frequently these particles are generated, but then also how long they last, right? So if we change the lifetime to, say, 4 beats, I'm going to change the rate. Let's go the rate up to 4 beats. Turn on the metronome so we have like an audio. We can kind of see when these dots are created. So rate and lifetime can really create some cool effects. Yeah. So I think that this particular device would be really, really awesome for creating kind of ambient drone sounds. Or if you are composing and you already have like a drone collection, like a couple of weeks ago, I looked at Drone Lab, which also comes with Ableton 11 suite, and really has awesome textures, awesome drone sounds in it. that would be really cool to layer with this, right? So like if you had a drone that was, you really liked like maybe the frequency response of it, it was really deep or really bright or whatever, but you wanted to introduce some kind of texture to it, some kind of motion that was a little different from the kind of motion or texture you get from traditional modulation, then you could throw in emitter, this emit tool, and you can make it so that the emitters respond to MIDI instead of time, right? So now when I play notes on my push, right, and they're pitch matched, right? If we go ahead and we uncheck this box here, MIDI note pitch, now what's going to happen is that I'm going to have the pitch and the sample taken, the grain that's being sampled and looped from the recording doesn't bear any correlation to the pitches that I'm playing here on the pads. This is just a rhythmic thing. So, you know, I could use this, I could use like a drum rack to actually sequence. Let's actually see how that would work. So if I were to go ahead and I'm going to have to replace this for a second with a drum rack. Go to drum rack, just empty drum rack is what I want. Load that. I'm going to click on pad 1, and in pad 1 I'm going to add a device here, and there I'm going to add emit. So inspired by nature, going to go down to emit like that. And let's see what that looks like in the software. So I've got that down here. I can open up my chain so I can see emit is on here. And I could actually go to I/O here and change this so that let me scroll. I'm going to select all notes from my drum pad. I'm going to go in here and let me grab one of their presets. So I got, just going to go ahead. Go ahead and load that into emit. There we go. All right. So now, oops, I don't want to do that. So now when I'm back here on this track, I'm on my drum rack. If I go to note view, oh, I guess I actually have to go in here and change this to MIDI note. That should, there we go. I'm getting sounds now. So I can actually sequence. So every time one of these pads from my drum rack is firing, it's sending a MIDI note into the emit device, and then it's triggering some, you know, one of the grains. So I'm getting this very unpredictable sound because the particle is sampling kind of a random part of the original clip, but it's happening on a rhythm that is that I'm sequencing like a drum beat. So if we look at the software, we can see what's going on there. So I've just got my, you know, this is effectively my kick C1, and all the notes are coming through here. If we look at the device, we can see how it's working. And every time one of the C1 pads on my sequence fires, it's generating a particle. So I think it's pretty awesome. I would be interested if anyone out there has been looking at this and has other ideas, other uses. I mentioned this last, maybe I guess on Monday, that the person who created this Max for Live device, a guy named Dillon Bastan, I understand, and their website dillonbastan.com has actually like PDF manuals for each one of these devices, and they were pretty helpful. So if you really want to get into either Emit or some of the other devices that come in inspired by nature, then maybe check that out and go to his website, download those manuals and read it, because he gives a very clear and concise explanation, I think much better than Ableton does. Ableton's stuff is kind of markety, it's going to be cool, you're going to have fun with it kind of vibe, whereas the Dillon Bastan manuals are a bit more like specific ideas that you could, what each device is really made for, what was the vision behind them. So I encourage you also to check that out. I'm going to look at next time on Friday, I'm going to look at the vector devices. So there's a whole set of vector devices that also come in the Inspired by Nature pack. It's just such an awesome pack. I haven't really had time. I don't really want to cover all of them in one stream, because it would just kind of be a headache. They're very different. The tree tone, which is fractal, is very different from this one. And so anyway, check them out. Let me know if there's anything that you want me to cover specifically. I'm always open to suggestions, and I'll see you on Friday. All right, take care.